Gandhi was clearly the most creative human being who lived in the 20th century in his lifetime for the earth.
Gandhi was at the center of the world stage in the 20th century, a very important period which marked the end of European colonialism.
Gandhi teaching spoke to us, said in effect, when you see something that is not right, not fair, not just, you have a moral obligation to do something, to say something.
He carried freedom struggle, but according 1,000-year-old India's tradition, non-violence, ahimsa.
Ahimsa paramo dharmah tatha himsa paro dhamah.
We must continue to delve deeper into the philosophy of nonviolent resistance. That is something about this method that has power.
Ahimsa paramang dhanam, ahimsa paramah tapah.
Violence breeds violence. Repression breeds retaliation, and only a cleansing of our whole society can remove this sickness from our souls.
Ahimsa paramo yagyah tatha himsa parang balam.
When by ending the system of white minority domination, humanity will have ensured that never again shall the scourge of racial tyranny raise its ugly head.
Ahimsa paramang mitram, ahimsa paramang sukham. Ahimsa paramang satyam, ahimsa paramang shrutam.
I can see that in the midst of death, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists. In the midst of darkness, light persists. Hence I gather that God is life, truth, light. He is love. He is the supreme good.
Gandhi studied at the Inns of Court in London and prepared himself to be, in essence, a British barrister. When he returned to India, he was unable to find work as a lawyer, as an advocate, as a barrister. And that is why he went to South Africa.
He goes as a lawyer, but soon becomes involved in the rights of Indians. You know, there's a racial regime being erected by the South Africans. In South Africa, there was a law which said Indians can't own property in the center of town. There was a law in South Africa which said Indians can't move from one province to another without permission. So Gandhi writes letters to the white authorities, said this law is unjust. Why shouldn't Indians have the same rights as everyone else? When the authorities do not listen, he says, I will violate this law. I will cross the boundary with my colleagues. But I will do it non-violently. I won't kill anyone.
The Zulus were having the rebellion, and Gandhi took a team of ambulance workers. But then he saw that these innocent Zulus had been so badly treated. And he also became kind of a nurse to these people and saw these wounds firsthand. Gandhi saw the horror of violence. He saw the need to find something that can fight injustice without inviting this terrible retribution. And it came to him that a non-violent struggle, absolutely fearless, you are prepared to pay a full price.
He coined the term nonviolence, and he coined the term nonviolence as a translation for the Jainist ahimsa. He says in that volume, ahimsa is not a negative word, and nonviolence is not a negative thing. And he actually says in the conversation with Dr. Howard Thurman, a black theologian from the United States in 1935, he actually says, nonviolence is love in practice, love in action, and it cannot be taught. It has to be lived.
Of course, it means non-violence, but it also means a struggle against injustice. So struggle and non-violence are combined in Gandhi's ahimsa. It also means, and that's a very tough addition to the meaning, no hatred, willingness to work with your current enemy in the future.
There was always an uncertainty to British rule in India. It was always in some sense strong but quite fragile. And a substantial part of the landmass, probably more than 1/3 of the landmass of India at that time, was under the control of princely rulers, who in most cases were in some kind of allegiance to the British. Sometimes they were not. And then you had the 11 provinces of British India, where there was direct imperial control, ultimately being run from London.
Gandhi launches 3 major All India movements against British rule. Of these, the Salt March of 1930 has become the most famous because of the symbolism of the march.
The Salt March is a very good example of how he worked, because he was seeking a way to face British imperialism, but he wanted it to involve millions. And what he did was to think of a way that he could get the word out across India's 600,000 or 700,000 villages of some form of non-cooperation. He had realized that no system can stand if the people refuse to cooperate with it. If the people refuse to give their consent, refuse to obey, there is no system, no dictatorship, no tyranny. There's no system that can stand if the people are not willing to obey and to cooperate.
You know, Gandhi took a commodity, salt. It was used by every Indian, but on which the British levied a tax, and said, I am going to break the law and I am going to march to the sea.
And he decided a march from Ahmedabad to Dandi at the sea, 241 miles, would bring communication of the problem with obeying the salt laws.
Everybody laughed at him. He said, you're trying to bring down the British Empire by defying the salt tax?
So the world media has to come and turn this into an event long enough and evocative enough for everyone to understand. And to turn something so elementary, so basic as an act of walking into an act of protest is what Gandhi begins to do. the sea of humanity which seems to be walking with him, it's a different group every time, moved by the same aspiration, moved by the same feeling, but walking with him.
And then, of course, he eventually reaches the coast, and he collects salt. And although it is only he's just bending down and scooping up some salt in his hand on the seashore, that very act is a sign of the average Indian person defying the mighty empire.
And the people of India had said in no uncertain terms that we do not wish to be ruled. Not by you, not by anybody else. We are capable of self-governance.
The idea of unarmed Indian demonstrators going to a beach, holding up a handful of salt and saying, we're not even allowed to consume salt without paying tax to the colonial state. All of that had a huge symbolic resonance, not only in India, but around the world.
So if you buy illegal salt, if you sell illegal salt, you are performing Satyagraha. So thousands and thousands and tens of thousands of people all across India. And that, of course, led to this very famous statement from Churchill in the House of Commons, saying, never in the history of British Empire has such humiliation been offered to the empire by the Indians.
Now, they had been instructed that you would be beaten. But even while blows come to you, your discipline should be such that you don't raise your hands in self-defense. So the demonstration of perfect nonviolence for him was that you do not even raise hands in self-defense.
There was a reporter for the United Press International named Webb Miller, who was one of those who was present. And he began reporting very early. In those days, a reporter would have to get on a telephone, an old-fashioned telephone, and phone to their editor and actually dictate the story. But as Webb Miller's ability to reach the UPI wire services meant that the word went literally around the world.
Not one of the marchers even raised an arm to fend off the blows. They went down like 10 pins. From where I stood, I heard the sickening whacks of the clubs on unprotected skulls.
He bears witness to the fact not of Gandhi's and India's nonviolence, but the moral ground breaking from under the British Empire.
The injured men writhed and squealed in agony, which seemed to inflame the fury of the police. The survivors, without breaking rank, silently and doggedly marched on until struck down.
The entire world had been awakened to the cruelties and barbarities of colonialism and how it worked. Something like 17,000 women went to prison as a result of the Salt March. The numbers are staggering. Bear in mind that this is long before the United States would have the vote for women or the United Kingdom would have the vote for women. Indian women are going to jail. By 1920, Gandhi was encouraging women to take leadership of local nonviolent struggles.
The British police and intelligence state from about 1907, 1908 onwards were extremely vigorous in monitoring different kinds of resistance within India and by Indians in different parts of the world. But one thing that you notice when you read the memos going back and forth between Scotland Yard, the Intelligence Bureau in Delhi, different British officials in different government departments, is that they don't quite know how to deal with non-violence. What do? Do you take 50,000 people and try and put them into prison? Do you simply let it run and hope that the energy of the protest movement will run out? People in Whitehall were left scratching their heads thinking, well, how do we deal with opponents like Gandhi?
You know, the British, they would have preferred the Indians, and especially the leadership with Gandhi, people like Gandhi, to act like the Zulus. Take arms, attack them, and they fight each other, like the battles they had in Natal in 1879, and they became Victorian glories. They wanted this to happen with the Indians, and it didn't happen. Actually, Gandhi used ethics for the first time, and they didn't know how to fight against ethicalization of politics, how to fight against spiritualization of politics, how to fight against nonviolence in general.
The Gandhian struggles were being avidly reported in New York, Ohio, Illinois, Atlanta. There was tremendous following of Gandhi. African Americans owned these newspapers, and they were reporting what was going on in India, and they were reporting it avidly. There was a lot of nonviolent civil resistance used by slaves. So there had never been a moment where there was no resistance. However, the price to be paid for resistance was extremely high, which is why you had lynching all over the southern states and other states as well. It's why you had disappearances. It's why there was random violence.
I said to President Barack Obama on occasion, I said, Mr. President, if it hadn't been for Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr., you wouldn't be President of the United States of America.
No more weeping, don't you know? No more weeping. No more weeping over me and before.
Gandhi had, in a way, predicted this in 1936 when some African Americans had met him in India. 1936, he had said that he thought that the unadulterated power of nonviolence would be demonstrated to the world by the African Americans.
When I was growing up in Alabama, I saw the signs that said white men, colored men, white women, colored women, white waiting, colored waiting. I saw fear on the faces of so many people of color.
They felt shame and humiliation and hurt by these white-colored signs, by these prohibitions to their being able to be fully human without anticipating hostility or bullying in the banks, in the grocery stores, segregation in the theaters. So this, for many people, was a cross, they would call it, and a burden.
I believe my father's passion for nonviolence came about the time that he was in graduate school. It may have been even college.
When he went to seminary, he heard one day from one of the great black pastors, clergymen, who preached about his own meetings with Gandhi. And after that, he went out immediately to the store and bought 6 books on Gandhi.
Used to say that I got my inspiration from Christ, but my technique from Gandhi.
You had a whole political party, primarily lodged in the South, that had pushed for a segregated society based on race and sexism, I should also add. So from my perspective, Gandhi became for me a major teacher because of his political efforts that he sought to do within the context of truth and justice. So I was one of the handful of people in the United States that recognized the power of what Gandhi had done with nonviolence in South Africa and India. So I shook hands then with Martin Luther King Jr. on February the 6th, 1957. We had immediate moral and character contact and relationship. So I moved south in 1958 into Nashville and began working with him and others in Nashville and elsewhere, teaching and counseling on nonviolent struggle, nonviolent theory and practice.
That is something about this method that has power. It has morality with it because it gives us the opportunity to work to secure moral ends through moral means. We go into the jails of Jackson, Mississippi, and transform these jails from dungeons of shame to havens of freedom and human dignity.
Perhaps the first incident of him using the philosophy of nonviolence was in 1955 when Miss Rosa Parks sat down on a bus refusing to give up her seat. She sat there with dignity and she was arrested. And my father became the chief spokesperson, and he and his team called for a boycott of the Montgomery buses. And for 381 days, people chose not to ride those buses.
Oh, freedom over me. And before I'll be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free.
The point is about this, that one of the things I taught was that when we get bullied and when violence is used against us, we do not allow that. We have to develop the character and the wisdom to not allow violence or oppression to stop our campaign. It requires our taking time to assess the violence, whether it's jail going or being met by mobs. We have to take the time to assess it, find the ways to face it and not allow it to succeed.
Black people and white people can be seated together on a bus leaving Washington, D.C. to travel through the South, through Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi. We were on our way to New Orleans to test the decision of the United States Supreme Court.
The bus then pulled up to the bus station. Alabama Governor John Patterson and the FBI had called the Klan, the Ku Klux Klan, and informed them when the bus was going to arrive. The chief of police in Montgomery said to the head of the Klan, "We'll give you 15 minutes before we get there." And so as soon as the Freedom Riders got out of the bus, it was mayhem. They were met by a mob, 500 people, white people with bicycle chains and chair legs, and just beat them to a pulp.
My seatmate was a young white gentleman. The two of us tried to enter a so-called white waiting room at a bus station. We were beaten and left lying in a pool of blood. The local police officials came up wanting to know whether we wanted to press charges. We said, no, we believe in the way of peace. We believe in the philosophy of nonviolence. We believe in the way of love. Many years later, one of the guys that beat us came to my office in Washington, D.C. White gentleman in his 70s, his son in his 40s. He said, "Mr. Lewis, I've been a member of the Klan. I'm one of the people that beat you. I want to apologize. Will you forgive me?" His son started crying. He started crying. I said, "I forgive you. I accept your apology." They hugged me. I hugged them, and the three of us cried together.
Now there are reconstructions of conversations that Robert Kennedy had with Governor John Patton in Alabama. That's unheard of in USA history. Attorney General facing a governor who says to the Kennedy administration, "I cannot stop the violence." And Robert Kennedy says to the governor of Alabama, "You mean to tell me you're governor, you have control of police, state police, National Guard, and you cannot allow some citizens of our society to ride through your state without mobs?"
I may be poor, but I am somebody. I may be on welfare, but I am somebody. I may be in jail, but I am somebody. I may be uneducated, but I am somebody. I am black, beautiful, proud. I must be respected. I must be protected.
The quest to achieve respect for human rights cannot happen unless there's nonviolence. You can't assert your rights in a situation of violence.
We decided we're going to have a march in Washington. August '63, and was the first major petition of people of the United States to the center of power, telling them there must be freedom for all, liberty for all, jobs for all, education for all.
This little light of mine, but I'm gonna let it shine. Well, this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.
And it was the people literally pushing us on toward the Lincoln Memorial. Some people say it was 250,000. I think it was many, many more. We were marching with a great sense of dignity and pride. I spoke number 6. Dr. King spoke number 10. And out of the 10 people that spoke that day, I'm the only one still around.
It came as a joyous daybreak to end the long night of their captivity. But 100 years later, the Negro still is not free.
We shall overcome. We shall overcome.
It was so orderly and so peaceful, not any violence. When the march was all over, President Kennedy invited us down to the White House again to meet with him. He stood in the door of the Oval Office. He was beaming like a proud father. He kept saying, "You did a good job, you did a good job." And when he got to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., he said, "You did a good job, and you had a dream." It was 18 days after the March on Washington. Church in Birmingham, where Dr. King had preached and spoke on many occasions, was bombed on a Sunday morning, where 4 little girls was killed.
On Birmingham Sunday, the blood ran like wine, and the choir kept singing of freedom. That cold autumn morning, no eyes saw the sun, and anime colors were numbered.
That was a sad and dark hour for the movement. And we appealed to people to be orderly, to be peaceful, and to follow the teaching of Gandhi and the teaching of Martin Luther King Jr.
Next week, I shall ask the Congress of the United States to act, to make a commitment it has not fully made in this century to the proposition that race has no place in American life or law.
In this summer of 1964, the Civil Rights Bill is the law of the land.
We are trying to remind the nation of the urgency of the moment. Now is the time to make real the promises of democracy. Now is the time.
There were people who were told they could not read or write well enough to become a registered voter. On a Sunday afternoon, a group of us decided to march 50 miles from Selma, Alabama to Montgomery, Alabama, to dramatize to the nation and to the world that people wanted to become participants in the democratic process.
The March on Selma was part of a broader campaign that spanned generations. The leaders that day, part of a long line of heroes. We gather here to celebrate them. We gather here to honor the courage of ordinary Americans willing to endure billy clubs and the chastening rod, tear gas and the trampling hoof. Men and women who, despite the gush of blood and splintered bone, would stay true to their North Star and keep marching towards justice.
We were beaten. I had a concussion on the bridge. I thought I saw death. I thought I was going to die. But somehow, in some way, we were spared.
It forced the vast majority of Americans who weren't really paying attention to pay attention. And it called forth their moral outrage and put pressure on politicians who needed the pressure and bolstered politicians who needed the backing.
In the same room where President Lincoln signed the first Emancipation Order in 1861, President Johnson signed the 1965 Voter Registration Act and pledged to millions of Americans a new chance to find a political voice.
And that night, 125 cities across our country burned from the riots. There's a city in Dover, Delaware, that had federal troops in it for 9 months after Martin Luther King died.
For those of you who are black and are tempted to fill with hatred and mistrust of the injustice of such an act against all white people, I would only say that I can also feel in my own heart the same kind of feeling. I had a member of my family killed, but he was killed by a white man. But we have to make an effort in the United States. We have to make an effort to understand, to get beyond or go beyond these rather difficult times.
And Indianapolis remained completely calm.
When I heard that Dr. King had been assassinated, I was campaigning for Robert Kennedy in Indianapolis, Indiana. And I said to myself, we still have Bobby. 2 months later, he was killed. It was a sad and dark hour for those of us in the civil rights movement.
I got arrested a few times. 40 times during the 60s. And since I've been in Congress, another 5 times.
Martin Luther King said, "It is chaos a community if we in the United States do not work from the angle of compassion and truth and justice and equality for all, then we're only going to get greater chaos and greater confusion. Because we have to understand that the old world behavior of the last 600 years has to be dismantled."
My philosophy is very simple. When you see something that is not right, not fair, not just, you have a moral obligation to say something, to do something, stand up, speak out.
In 1931, he went to negotiate in the Round Table Conference. And although the negotiations that Gandhi had with the British went nowhere, I mean, they were too complicated for any easy, straightforward transition to independence, he made so many British friends. Charlie Chaplin came to see him. George Bernard Shaw came to see him. He could have stayed in a rich Indian businessman's house, but no, he stayed in the East End in a Quaker settlement with poor people. Children would come into his room all the time and chat with him.
If you look at the young Gandhi interacting with the British imperial state, he was always dressed in that very traditional way. He might be wearing a frock coat and a hat. And then you look at the later Gandhi going to meet the King Emperor in Buckingham Palace, and famously going there, wearing fewer clothes than were expected if you were going to meet the King Emperor of India. And then the king complaining that he was improperly dressed, and Gandhi saying His Majesty was wearing enough for both of us. It's a symbolic thing that anybody in any nation at any point in history can believe in. They can say, here was a simple person going against power and speaking truth to power.
1940, Winston Churchill becomes Prime Minister of Great Britain. Winston Churchill is rightly recognized as a great patriot by the British people because he led the rearguard battle to keep the Nazis out. But at the same time, Winston Churchill was an unreconstructed imperialist. He did not want to share power with Indians or with Africans or wherever else in Asia and Africa that the British were in command, where they had their colonies. He did not want to cede control at all. But the British were saying, we are fighting for our own freedom against Hitler. But they were not willing to concede to Gandhi and the Congress the same principle of freedom. So there was a clear contradiction.
And Gandhi had clearly begun to grasp that both the world wars had made the idea of the empire untenable. The patience of the Indian people had also begun to run thin, and the people of India were also now willing and capable to make that final sacrifice to say, even if it means laying down my life, I want my freedom.
So in 1942, they realized that this is the only time they can put some more pressure on the British. And they passed the resolution of quit India, do or die. We are going to make you leave now. So the resolution was passed, and everybody was arrested immediately and put in prison.
It's clear by 1946 that the British are leaving India. There is a cabinet mission that is sent by the British. They meet the different stakeholders. They meet Gandhi and Azad and Nehru and the Congress Party. They meet Jinnah and the Muslim League. And they're not able to achieve a clear resolution. At this stage, Jinnah, who is committed to the idea of an independent Muslim homeland called Pakistan, calls for direct action day.
Gandhi wants to fight this. Gandhi wants to use the trust he has won to get them to change their attitudes. This is a very tough goal of his, but he fasts.
He was ultimately successful in bringing about an end to the Calcutta killings with that fast. It did work in that situation, and the moment came when he asked for a glass of orange juice to break his fast.
The slaughter of Hindus in Noakhali in Bengal is avenged by Hindus in Bihar who dump on Muslims because Muslims are a minority in Bihar. And Gandhi is appalled and leaves everything and tries to go and douse the flames. Now this is 1946. Gandhi is now 77 years old.
At no point in his life after 1915, he was so physically isolated.
He's very old, he's very lonely because many of his closest friends have died. You know, Tagore has died, C.F. Andrews has died, his secretary Mahadev Desai has died, his wife Kasturba has died. And right at the end of his life, he embarks on this pilgrimage for peace across eastern Bengal.
তবে পথের কাঁটা ও তুই রক্ত মাখা চরণ তলে একলা দলরে.
He's walking through that 57 villages tour of Noakhali that he does. He's actually walking bare feet. As an act of atonement, as an act of prayerfulness, he says that I'm walking through killing fields where the bloods of innocents have been shed.
যদি তোরে ডাক শুনে কেউ না, 是。 রে একলা চলো রে
Britain was the colonial master of South Africa, where racism was first instituted. In Johannesburg, under British rule, black men and women could not walk on the pavement. They had to walk down the street. They couldn't step onto the pavement like whites. And so the British started the racism that was then institutionalized into a formal structure of legislative apartheid covering every nook and cranny of the country's life. Apartheid was designed to strip every black person, every Indian person of dignity and self-respect, and to subordinate them completely.
Growing up in Durban, in South Africa, as a young kid, you immediately saw segregation on every level. So whether it was the school you attended, the beach, the park, the cinema, all segregated to ethnic groupings.
I think having to carry a pass all the time is like a dog carrying that permit.
In the late 1940s and the early 50s, when apartheid started to be enforced, that Nelson Mandela and his comrades started to adopt more militant tactics and say, look, this is getting us nowhere. We've been doing this for generations and it is getting worse. That is when they drew on Gandhi's nonviolent direct action philosophy and started to organize stay-at-homes by black workers who used to commute into the city every day to serve their white masters, or rent strikes, or bus boycotts. Those kind of tactics which are in the Gandhian tradition.
There are many people who feel that it is useless and futile for us to continue talking peace and non-violence against a government whose reply is only savage attacks on an unarmed and defenseless people.
In 1956, 156 people were arrested as people who committed treason. And then after almost 2 years of harassment of those people, they, discharged them all.
Apartheid got more brutal. The laws got more vicious. The leadership of the African National Congress was put in jail, was tortured, killed, and the laws were getting more repressive. The police state was getting worse, to the point where the African National Congress in 1960 and other radical opposition groups in the resistance were banned.
At that stage, he felt that a time comes when you have to do something differently. And so he decided to take up arms. So the whole idea of using arms was either self-defense or it was to attack installations to bring the government to the table, to get them to come and negotiate.
He didn't believe in terrorism. He always knew there was a danger of a civilian casualty, but he chose a guerrilla action rather than terrorist action.
His leadership was remarkable. He was able to manifest that. He stood on the shoulders of Chief Albert Luthuli in the work that he did, and Albert Luthuli's maintenance of nonviolent struggle. Mandela learned a great deal from that, and Luthuli would receive a Nobel Peace Prize as well.
Demonstrations against the South African government's strict apartheid policies flare into shocking violence. At Sharpsville, an industrial township, thousands gather outside a police station in protest against new laws requiring every African to carry a pass at all times. The crowd refused to disperse and began stoning the police, who opened fire into the crowd from behind a wire fence. In 2 days of demonstrations that began here, between 50 and 100 were killed and hundreds injured.
We never had television until 1976 in South Africa. Part of the reason for that was that the apartheid government felt that by putting on television, it will enlighten the masses into rebellion, which was quite ludicrous, but it gave the example to the world of how crazy and how paranoid the apartheid regime was about segregation and their authority.
At the Rivonia trial, Rivonia being the place where all the leadership of the African National Congress, all Nelson Mandela's comrades were arrested and captured. When they came to be put on trial in Pretoria, at the end of the case, there was the opportunity to address the judge. And Mandela's lawyers pleaded with him not to make the statement that he did. They said, if you say this, you could be executed. And nevertheless, he did.
I have fought against white domination, and I have fought against black domination. I have cherished the idea of a democratic and free society in which all persons will live together in harmony and with equal opportunities. It is an idea for which I hope to live for and to see realized. But my Lord, if it needs be, it is an idea for which I am prepared to die.
His own lawyers were deeply, deeply upset and full of pessimism that the next day the judge would pass the death sentence. In fact, to everybody's surprise, it became a life sentence. And Mandela disappeared onto Robben Island with his comrades and was to remain in prison for 27 years.
When I landed on Robben Island, they told us we're going to meet the biggest criminals in the history of South Africa. I was expecting tattoo faces, gangsters. I met elderly old people like Mandela, Zulus and them. When they treat with me with that respect, I would say to myself, God has made us all different colors, different look, like we must respect each other.
Hasim Bonanga, Hasim Bonanga, Mandela.
Nelson Mandela personified that spirit of nonviolent action, even though he was one of the people who called for the use of violence earlier in the struggle. But in his persona, he manifests the treatment of the adversary as human, not doing anything to destroy the well-being or the life of the opponent. He manifested that.
By the 1980s, it had risen up, and there was the townships, the black townships, were becoming ungovernable, and the country was steadily drifting towards civil war. By the end of the 1980s, when the economy was in a dangerous place, it was starting to escalate into crisis because of international loan sanctions, because of the international boycott movement, the pressure that the anti-apartheid movement had put on around the world, huge mobilizations. Compared with the 1964, when Nelson Mandela went onto Robben Island with all his comrades, when the resistance was smashed, basically, the white rulers of apartheid came to Mandela in prison, as he always thought they would, and started to talk to him, and started to negotiate. And it was his wisdom that he had gone into prison as a burly freedom fighter, with a bit of arrogance. He developed into an older man, much more wise, much more patient, much more understanding. He studied the history of the Afrikaner people who were the inventors of apartheid and were in government.
Yes, he did lead a militant movement in the early years. But what an incredible feat of his to create a society of mutual forgiveness, of equality. Yes, you may have been oppressors, we were the oppressed yesterday, but we will live as brothers today and tomorrow. What a formidable example to the world.
When you've had countries so bitterly divided, as South Africa was after the end of apartheid, and the new rainbow democracy under Nelson Mandela was born, you have your past to deal with. And how do you deal with that? And a lot of countries are stuck in the past because of the hatred and the bitterness. And what Mandela did with Desmond Tutu, Archbishop Desmond Tutu, chairing the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, was they tried to address that by giving the white police officers and army officers and others who'd committed terrible atrocities the opportunity to come before the commission, confess what they'd done, apologize for it, and it was a way of healing in the Gandhian mold as well, of healing a society from bitterness and hatred.
To jest, mi się wydaje, jedyne wyjście, że tylko sprawiedliwe związki, do których my będziemy mieli jakąś władzę i będziemy mogli, że tak powiem, sami decydować, co oni mogą robić i, że tak powiem, będą kierowane przez nas.
Proszę o przejście, proszę o przejście, proszę.
Że filozofia komunizmu w walce z nami była prosta. Nie pozwolić im się zorganizować. Każdą próbę zorganizowania, a nawet spotkania więcej jak 2 osób, rozbijać. I nie mogliśmy się zorganizować, byliśmy wciąż rozbijani. Do końca zbliżała się druga w tysiąclatka chrześcijaństwa. Na tą okoliczność Polak został papieżem. Prawie cały naród brał w różnych miejscach udział w tej modlitwie papieża. I opozycja na tyle była silna, że te zorganizowanie przejęła i poprowadziła do boju.
It was as if the communist state had ceased to exist. Never mind the Red Army, never mind Leonid Brezhnev. Millions of people came out on the streets, and it was solidarity with a small s before the solidarity movement. It gave people hope and the belief that you could change something.
To była podobna walka. My braliśmy przykład z Gandhiego też, walcząc podobnie
pokojowo, bez przemocy. Tylko że my jeszcze mieliśmy dodatkowe argumenty, że tu stało w Polsce ponad 200 000 żołnierzy sowieckich, a na Małopolski był ponad 1 000 000 i Silosy z bronią nuklearną.
To ja potwierdzam z pełnym poczuciem odpowiedzialności za sprawę. Działalność cenzury
I've never forgotten going through the shipyard gates, guarded by the shipyard workers, festooned with flowers and pictures of the Pope. And one knew this was something special, and they founded this movement called Solidarność.
Jeżeli konstytucja jest tylko deklaracją szlachetnych intencji, a ustawy następnie wprowadzane kłócą się z tą konstytucją, to ta konstytucja stanowi, przepraszam za określenie, świstek papieru.
They had a number of demands, of which the most important was independent, self-governing trades unions. And this movement spread like wildfire across the country, and within 2 weeks, they had this thing which was unprecedented in the history of the communist world. And the interesting point is, they had learned from the Pope, they had learned from the Soviet invasion of Czechoslovakia in 1968, they had learned from the failure of the Hungarian armed revolution in 1956. No violence. No violence. We mustn't cross the line.
Jeśli rzeczywiście nie będą wypuszczeni ludzie, proklamujemy jeszcze raz strajk. Dlatego nie widzę innego wyjścia. Kontynuować dalej. Jeśli nie będą wypuszczeni, jeszcze raz zrobimy to samo.
Filozofia była prosta. Nie możesz podnieść ciężaru komunistycznego, no to doproś jeszcze, zorganizuj siły, abyś go podniósł. But he had a political genius. He knew exactly how far to go, how to rally people round, when to draw back. Partly, the tanks didn't roll precisely because of this, if you will, Gandhian self-discipline. I mean, I've spent some time studying the story of non-violent movements across the world, and of course, the fatal moment is when the non-violent discipline breaks down. Then you invite the violent repression, and they always manage to hold back. And that's why the movement lasted, 16 months, which is an amazing achievement in the story of the Soviet bloc.
Pieśnią sił śpiewał, że blisko już świt. Świec tysiące palili mu, z nad głów podnosił się dym. Śpiewał, że czas by runął mur. Oni śpiewali wraz z nim.
Finally, martial law was declared in December 1981.
Dreszcze na wskroś serc i głów. Śpiewali więc, klaskali w rytm, jak wystrzał, poklask ich brzmiał. I ciążył łańcuch, zwlekał świt.
Jak będziemy porządkować świat, coraz bardziej będziemy widzieli te fundamenty, które doprowadziły do porządku. I na pewno pierwszym elementem będzie właśnie Gandhi i jego metody walki, drugim będzie solidarność i brak tego trzeciego, które przesądzi o tym wszystkim. If you want to ask why the Berlin Wall came down in November 1989, I think the story starts in Poland in 1980. Because solidarity was not crushed, and the Soviet Union realized that they could not reassert control over Eastern Europe as they had in the past. You have a long period through the 1980s when it's not clear who's winning and who's losing, What changes that is, number one, Gorbachev comes along. But also a communist regime in Poland, which realized that the economy was absolutely, down the tubes in a terrible state, and that they had to try to negotiate with the opposition.
The Berlin Wall was opened by Communist Party reformers because of the strength of the movements. And in between, as these movements spread from Poland to Hungary into Czechoslovakia and across the Eastern Bloc, you could see that there had been a decision made, popular decision, not to fight with violence.
I came to Prague from London with the last BAA flight, and it came as a shock. There were tanks in the streets. I was 17. It definitely was one of the crucial experiences. Also because I could see what people can do in resisting violence, what non-violent civil resistance means. But the regime responded with a heavy-handed campaign in the media. People were imprisoned, hundreds of people were questioned, harassed by secret police.
I went to Prague before the end of the Soviet Union. I know about the theaters. And one of the playwrights was Václav Havel. Václav Havel had spent more time in jail than Gandhi, to give you a point of comparison. And Václav Havel pondered for many years how to fight a crushing Communist Party system. And he figured out a great many insights on his own, based upon some sharing of information. Also the history of drama. As a playwright, he was involved in culture. Czechoslovakia is a very highly literate society before World War II. It had a highly literate past and highly literate leadership. So there's a great deal within the society to work with of a cultural remembrance of a time when pursuit of ideas was important. Within the theatrical community, Havel begins to lead the emergence of what would become called the Velvet Revolution.
Yes, he was a playwright, but he was always a political writer and a political animal. It was absolutely his great idea and that of the Charter 77 movement. And in a way, it goes back to an insight even before Gandhi that every political system, however repressive, depends to some degree on the consent. Even if they're being imprisoned, it depends on some degree of consent. So out of this, Havel developed the argument that if we speak the truth, living in truth was his other great motto, if we show the way, the moment will come when the mass of the people will turn, and that will be the moment when the regime is finished. And remember, the opposition in Czechoslovakia, even in the late 1980s, was only 2,000 or 3,000 people. It's a tiny, tiny minority.
divadelníkama se všema a Božko jede. Jo, vy jste mezi tím tady co si připravili, co je pravděpodobně velmi v souladu s tím, co my jsme projednali se studákama a
Václav Havel was a key, unquestioned figure and a leader, intellectual leader in Charter 77. There was this Gandhi film, Richard Attenborough's, shown here in, I think, 1987. One of the most stupid mistakes the communist regime ever made, because I myself saw it probably 7 times. Because, you know, people were coming to the cinema, sat there in darkness, liberated, free. When people applauded and screamed while the film was screened. It was not about Gandhi and British and India. It was about us. It was about how you stand up for your dream, how you stand up for your freedom, for your rights. So out of a sudden, there was this symbol of non-violence, and it became absolutely clear that in this hectic regime change, violence never was an option. Because communist regime was supposed to be forever. And we were convinced that's forever.
The Berlin Wall has come down on the 9th of November. What's going to happen in Czechoslovakia? Is it going to go?
The communist authorities had no good solution. The students asked for official approval to stage a demonstration to commemorate 50 years of anti-Nazi student demonstration. Do you ban it? You will be likened to Nazis. Do you allow it? You can bet it will be a trouble. And they opted for the worst of all bad solutions. They staged a police assault on student demonstration, injuring a few hundred people, and there were rumors about even at least one dead.
His name is Martin Schmidt, a 20-year-old student whom they say was clubbed to death. The regime says it never happened, but it has galvanized the reformists who paraded through the capital, while the police stood by and watched.
And this one information about the possible fatality changed everything, because until then there was this unwritten social contract. The regime saying to people, you shut up, and we will make sure that you have a decent standard of life, but don't mix with politics.
Demonstrations started in the main square in Prague and Wenceslas Square. And as time went on, they got larger and larger and larger.
And it's like a fairy tale for two reasons. Number one, because it comes very late in 1989, so in a sense all the hard work has been done by the Poles and the Hungarians and the Germans, but also because Václav Havel is a playwright. And he directs the greatest work of political theater in European history. 300,000 people gathered on Wenceslas Square, him speaking from the balcony. And the moment I will never forget is when the people in the crowds do something quite extraordinary. They reach into their pockets and they take out their keys and shake the key like that. Now that doesn't sound much, but when you have 300,000 sets of keys being shaken, it's a most amazing sound, like the sound of Chinese bells. And that one, within a fortnight, the Communist Party had basically given up the ghost.
I think that it is most important time after 20 years that the public and the society is now able very openly to express their wish for democracy, for freedom.
Co je nejkrásnější, co je nejkrásnější, usměvavé tváře. Co je nejkrásnější, co je nejkrásnější, usměvavé tváře.
Pevný je stůl, pevnější je hora, pevný je stůl, plouchá na ní voda. Co je však největší, co je však největší, ta lidská svoboda. Co je však největší, co je však největší, ta lidská svoboda.
I would say that what we saw between 1979 and 1989 was the birth of a new kind of revolution, non-violent revolution, velvet revolution, in which a nuclear-armed communist empire, the Soviet Empire, just softly and suddenly vanished away in a matter of 2 years, something absolutely unprecedented in history. It was the liberation of Eastern Europe. More than 100 million people were liberated. Most of their countries became more or less liberal democracies.
We can say without any caution that the nonviolent revolutions of the Eastern Bloc played a definable role in the ending of the Cold War. Gandhi was opposed to partition. Gandhi was not an advocate for partition. He was charged with having been an advocate for partition, but that's really a complete misreading of his record.
And Gandhi's closest colleagues, these people that I mentioned, Patel, Nehru, Rajgopalachari, Rajendra Prasad, people like that, they said, all right, fine, we don't like partition, but let's accept it. Let's be realistic. Gandhi is asking for too much. They were impatient. And you might say that the bulk of political India was more with them than with him. Many of the Indian people too said, all right, let's have an end. We'll solve the problem. Let Pakistan be created. Gandhi acquiesced in partition of India. He did not want India to be partitioned. But one thing he never would agree to was that India would become a religious theocracy. India would not become a Hindu state. India would remain a state for all.
The British told Mountbatten the partition would take about 2 years. And he said, oh, nonsense, 2 years. I can do it much faster than that. And then he embarked rapidly on implementing the concept of partition. This is why the level of deaths were so high.
So you have a situation where people know that there is going to be a new country called Pakistan, and Muslims in India start to move out towards the wings of Pakistan, what's now Pakistan and Bangladesh. You start to get Sikhs and Hindus moving inwards towards India. And the key reason for the horror of that time, of the fact that around 1 million people were murdered, between 14 and 17 million people migrated, was because once you start to get ethnic cleansing and violence, you then get a reciprocal thing.
It brought misery, killing, abominable murder on both sides.
Gate of freedom is open in India. The new flag of Pakistan flies over a nation of more than 80 millions, the largest Muslim state in the world. So India, with over 380 million people and 100 creeds, one of the earth's ancient civilizations, her future is beset with strife, but her people are free.
Gandhi was in mourning because freedom had come for what was for him an unacceptable price. The fact that Hindus and Muslims were each other's throat deeply dismayed and appalled and disgusted him.
He was in Calcutta trying to tell the Muslims this was as much your place as anybody else's. Do not leave. And even if it means that I fast to bring sense to this people, if I need to fast against my own government, I will do so, because if you stay here, it is in some ways refuting the idea of a two-nation theory.
No, but this is Gandhi's greatness. He didn't give in to this despondency. He was despondent, so he did not celebrate 15th August. A reporter came to him from the BBC, he says, I have no message, I cannot celebrate. But he said, I will fight this till the end of my life.
And that's why Mountbatten very evocatively says to him that on the Punjab border, we have 55,000 soldiers. In Calcutta, we have a one-person army, which is you.
So Gandhi realized, Gandhi said that we must have fear not and hate not. Two components of nonviolence, fear not and hate not. And he found that fear not was accepted, but hate not was not accepted so much.
But this is not an indictment of nonviolent action. Nonviolent action was tried, and the British had the option of leaving without doing what they did. They did not do that. That's not Gandhi's fault.
He's seeking light through prayer. He's seeking light through sharing grief, he's seeking light through empathy with the people who have lost everything. And the last fast begins. And that's when he begins to have this vision of death, of a violent death, which might redeem him. And not only redeem him, probably might redeem us.
Gandhi at this stage has not finished his life's work. He wants to go to Pakistan and assure the minorities there that he wants to go to the Punjab and then to Sindh. But of course he's prevented by the bullets that Nathuram Godse fires into him on the evening of 30th January 1948.
Raghupati Raghava Raja Ram Patita Pavana Sitaram.
So great was India's love for the saintly Gandhi that fighting and riots ceased. The peace which Gandhi had striven so hard to establish in his life was achieved at last in his martyr's death.
Vaishnava jana to tene kahiye je peed parai jane re.
আধারের গায়ে গায়ে পরশ তব সারা রাত ফোটাক তারা নব নব নয়নের দৃষ্টি হতে ঘুচবে কালো যেখানে পড়বে সেথায় দেখবে আলো.
Because Gandhi made the decision that his life was going to be a good fight. He was not going to join the evil that he experienced or the injustice, that he was going to fight it. So he aligned up his life with the creative power of the universe.
Many years ago, when Abraham Lincoln was shot, and incidentally he was shot for the same reason that Mahatma Gandhi was shot for, namely for committing the crime of wanting to heal the wounds of a divided nation. And when he was shot, Secretary Stanton stood by the dead body of the great leader and said these words, "Now he belongs to the ages." And in a real sense, we can say the same thing about Mahatma Gandhi, and even in stronger terms. Now he belongs to the ages.
If we aspire to live in a more just world, more humane world, a world which is less rapacious, which is less prone to vivisection of each other and of nature, then we need teachers. And one of those teachers will have to be Gandhi.
What do you want? I can't breathe. Please, the name of it. I can't breathe shit.
Bro, get up, get in the car, man.
I will.
Get up, get in the car.
I can't move.
I've been waiting the whole time, man. Get up, get in the car.
Mama.
Get up and get in the car right.
I can't.
Gandhi is the expression of all forms of dissent. And our world needs dissent, needs disobedience, needs to disobey unjust laws.
The biggest challenge to human rights today
is hatred.
Jews will not replace us!
The Gandhian nonviolence, what he's teaching us is how to democratize democracies. It's not because we live with liberal values that we should not democratize them, and we should be very careful in not taking them towards new forms of oppression.
We spoke a great deal about redeeming the soul of America. We have to find a way to redeem the soul of the world and create a world community at peace with itself.
The only way through dialogue. So therefore, I describing now this 21st century should be a century of dialogue.
When the United States takes over the management of the empires, as it did in the 20th century, and where we have more than 800 military bases in over 100 countries in the world, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth cannot create a more hopeful world.
For in a day when Sputniks and explorers dash through outer space and guided ballistic missiles are carving highways of death through the stratosphere, no nation can win a war. Today we no longer have a choice between violence and non-violence. It is either non-violence or non-existence.
I'll meet you where the sky is torn, meet you in the air. I'll meet you before the world was born, and we had not a care. This is an invitation to a high location for someone who wants to belong. This is a meditation on your radio station. If you like it, you can sing along. I am I am I am I'll meet you where there is no weeping. Your tears are now a stream. I'll meet you where there is no sleeping, where we wake up to dream. This is an invitation to a high location for someone who wants to belong. This is a meditation